So far we have seen how profile, the Spring Boot profile works with the properties files, right? Now let's take another look at how we can use Spring Boot profiles to instantiate beans, or basically to decide which bean needs to be instantiated as per the profile that has been selected, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly go and create a new package, let's say, and I'm going to call it gateway package, let's say, right, and I'll just create an interface as well, and I'll call it gateway interface. This is just for example, it's not as part of any business functionality, right? We are just trying to establish a few things here. So, and this is as per, I'm sure you would know, in object-oriented programming, we can inherit a certain class or implement a certain interface, right? So I'm just creating an SMS gateway class, and this class will implement the gateway interface, right? And similarly, I'll also create another uh, class. Let's say we'll call it email gateway, right? And this class as well implements gateway, right? So, and we'll come back to this interface class, and let's just define some functionality, or not define as such, and declare some functionality, right? So a gateway is used to send a certain message, right? Let's assume. So in that case, we have written a function uh, called send, right? It could be send message as well, but like I said, this is just for proving the point that we are doing this, right? So we have two problems. What are those problems? We have two implementing classes here which do not implement this method. So let's just go ahead and quickly implement those, right? So we have implemented uh, this method here, and I'll just, for simplicity, print a dummy message. I'll just say inside SMS gateway, right? And I'll just copy this and I'll go straight to email gateway, which is also complaining about the same. And in this, I will say email gateway, right? So I'm sure you have understood what we have done here, right? We created an interface, and we have now created two implementations of this interface, right? So at this point, if we have to decide which interface needs to be injected for which environment or which profile, we'll have to specify that somewhere, right? So that Spring Boot knows. So I'm just going to create a configuration file here, right? So I'll call it training configuration, right? So I can use this class for all the other configurations as well in case I need to. I'll just annotate it with @configuration this time. So Spring Boot knows that there will be bean definitions that it needs to look at in this file, right? And I'll say @bean, right? And I will create a method on public. This will return gateway, and I'll call this SMS gateway. And this one will actually return new SMS gateway, right? And I'll create a similar bean. This will also return gateway, but this will be email gateway. And this time I'll return new email gateway here, right? Now, how do we tell Spring Boot when to instantiate which of these beans? For that, we will introduce another annotation, @profile, right? And let's say that SMS gateway needs to be instantiated for dev, and I'll just copy this annotation and paste it here, just under bean, and I'll say this should be used for test, right? And this being done, let's just quickly check what is okay. So we have test as our profile which has been set, right? I'll quickly start. Okay, maybe we missed out something. How do we test this? So in order to test this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the training service class. Where is training service? Maybe here it is, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to auto wire the gateway interface, right? And this we are doing it so that we can test our bean creation. And at this stage, I'll say gateway dot send, right? So the service class doesn't know which one to instantiate, right? The service class just is aware of a gateway bean. What is the underlying bean inside it is something that Spring Boot has to now decide based on the profile that we have selected, right? So with this, I'll just start this application, right? The application is started. Let me quickly go to the browser and hit this endpoint once again, right? So it prints hello world test, which it has read from the application properties file, but we'll quickly come back and see what is printed in the console because we had done system.out.print, right? It is actually printing inside email gateway, which is something that we had put over here, right? System.out.print email gateway. And email gateway is decided based on the configuration that we have set, right? So if I just change my profile to dev in the application.properties, then it will take this bean and not this bean, right? So if we want to test that, we can quickly test that bit as well. I'll just change this to dev and I'll restart the service, right? So now that the service is restarted, I'll hit this endpoint once again. And as you can see, this message is now being read from the dev properties file. But if we come back and see here, we are now in the SMS gateway, right? Which is a method that we have in the SMS gateway class, right? And it is actually picking from this particular configuration, right? So I hope it's clear how we can uh, switch between the beans that get injected based on the profile that has been selected, right? I hope that is clear. Just one more point that we can sort of even generalize this. You don't have to specify all the profiles, right? When you are creating beans. If I just say, I can also do something like this. So this basically means if the profile is not dev, then use this. So it could be test, it could be pre-prod, it could be prod, it could be anything, right? As long as it's not dev, this particular gateway bean is going to get injected, right? So let's quickly test that as well because we've been testing everything, right? Just to be sure. And I'll quickly go here and change this to test, right? And I'll start this. Right, so the app is started. I'll quickly go and hit this. So the configuration file obviously is, I think we've seen this multiple times now. It is test. And if we go and see, this is email gateway, right? So if we go back and see our configuration file, email gateway is for anything other than dev, right? So I hope that is clear. And just one more point here, and that is where we have to be really careful, is that if you're defining a bean like this, which is per profile, you have to be absolutely sure that you have covered all the profiles, right? Like something like this. This covers all the profiles because either it's dev or it's not, right? But if let's say I forget to create a bean for a specific profile, right, which is not covered as part of my profile definitions, then let's see what happens. I'll just restart. There you go. The application did not even start. And why is that? Because it does not know which gateway bean to inject for the profile that has been selected, right? So it could be dangerous if we do not take care of all the profiles, or if we create a new profile after defining this bean and we forget to sort of take care of that profile in this configuration file, right? So this can potentially result in application failing to start, right? So just that bit needs to be taken care of, that when you're defining beans, either you have a default fallback, that if it is not dev or test, then fall back to a default bean, something like this, right? But if this is not the case, then you will have to specifically define beans for each profile, right? Otherwise, the application would fail to start.